Have you ever felt that routine is too small for you? That there must be something deeper than just putting out fires and checking off schedules? But deep inside, a question keeps pulsing that refuses to be silenced. Is there a way to walk with purpose and remain at peace even when everything around me roars? You are not alone in that search. There is an ancient mountain where a living voice still resounds, and today we will climb it together. Not to hear pretty ideas that vanish by sunset, but to receive keys that open real doors. Keys to order the heart, heal relationships, ignite hope, and learn to breathe the peace that does not collapse when the winds rise. Picture yourself sitting on the hillside, the breeze brushing your face, as Jesus speaks directly to you. He doesn't bring crowns or armies. He brings words that flip the world's values upside down, as if he took our scale and set it right side up. And he begins where no one else would, with the heart, not with the schedule, not with the goals, not with the budget, with the heart. And surprisingly, everything else falls into place. Before speaking about external goals, he reveals who we are in essence and what we were made for. You are the salt. You are the light. He says it plainly, in the second person, as one who awakens a sleeping identity. To be salt is not to sprinkle life with an optional touch of spirituality. It is to prevent decay from taking over what is good, to preserve what is noble when corruption threatens to consume everything. To be light is not to draw attention to ourselves, but to make the path visible when confusion darkens every step. In a world that grows accustomed to shadows, living with integrity, compassion, and truth is as tangible as lighting a lamp in a windowless room. Everything changes instantly, and yet Jesus does not push us to perform without first transforming our interior. He does not demand we shine by sheer willpower. He leads us back to the source of the radiance. That's why his message moves into a paradox. True greatness does not announce itself with noise. It begins by admitting what we lack. Blessed are the poor in spirit. How does that fit into a world that idolizes self-sufficiency? That's the novelty. Dependence on God is not a weakness to hide. It is the doorway through which the kingdom enters. Spiritual poverty is not about material lack. It is about seeing ourselves in the light of truth. Without His grace, we fall short. With His grace, we learn to walk steadily. When we accept this, the window of the soul opens and the sun pours in. Humility becomes oxygen, freeing, ordering, softening the soil so the seed can grow. And when the heart softens, something we avoid comes to the surface. Pain. Jesus doesn't mask suffering, nor does He glorify it. He faces it and speaks a promise. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. To cry is not defeat, it is sincerity. That knot in your throat when you think of what you lost, of what you failed at, of what sin broke. That knot, placed before God, does not choke you. It leads you to His embrace. The comfort Jesus speaks of is not a temporary anesthetic. It is a restoration that begins within and spills outward, a peace beyond explanation. That is why community matters. To weep with those who weep, to hold up those who fall, is a concrete way the divine consolation takes on flesh among us. Where there is compassion, the kingdom becomes tangible. But Jesus doesn't stop at emotion. The prating. He shows us a strange strength the world tends to dismiss. Meekness. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Meekness is not weakness. It is power under control. It is letting go of the inner violence that pushes us to dominate, and instead choosing to respond from the peace that trusts in God's justice. The world applauds aggressive conquest. Jesus honors serenity that builds. And against all odds, He calls the meek heir, not because they seize land, but because life, when lived in sync with the Father, becomes fertile ground. Meekness heals bonds, prevents fires before they spread, and turns leadership into service. From that foundation, humility, comfort, meekness, comes a hunger that nothing material can satisfy. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. This is not a cold justice of regulations, but righteousness pulsing with God's heart, equity, compassion, truth that stands upright. This hunger drives us not to settle for what is legal, if it is inhumane to see the marginalized as brothers and sisters, to denounce hypocrisy without ceasing to extend a hand. It is a hunger that does not make us bitter. It makes us brave, and the promise is daring. They will be filled, not because everything is instantly fixed here, but because the reigning God never leaves empty those who seek his righteousness. In his kingdom, every step of faithfulness finds water in the desert, but this faithfulness to avoid turning cold needs mercy. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Mercy is not sentimentalism. It is love that rolls up its sleeves. It is seeing another's pain and deciding to intervene. It is letting go of revenge to break the cycle of resentment. It is giving a new beginning, even when logic says enough. Mercy repairs torn fabric, creates second chances, opens ways where judgment would only raise walls. And here lies a precious mystery. Whoever practices mercy becomes a vessel of the very grace they extend. The measure we use, says Jesus, will be measured back to us. To forgive 70 times 7 is not a formula. It is the lifestyle of those who have been forgiven first. Now, how is all this sustained without collapsing into hypocrisy? Jesus points to the very center. The heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Purity is not rigid gesture or checklist of prohibitions. It is inner transparency, alignment between what I think, desire, and do. A pure heart does not mean a heart never tempted. It means a heart constantly turning to God for cleansing. And the promise is breathtaking. They will see God, not only in eternity, but in the fabric of the everyday, his guidance in decisions, his hand in details, his presence in the middle of the day. A pure heart sharpens vision. It learns to recognize Christ in the neighbor's face and to distinguish his voice from the noise. When vision is cleansed, peace ceases to be theory. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. It is not enough to avoid fights. The peace of the kingdom must be cultivated actively. To make peace is to speak when pride would stay silent, to build bridges where distrust demands walls, to seek justice so peace is not a mask. This task is so divine that those who embrace it receive a new name, children of God. God, the great reconciler, stamps his likeness on those who choose his way. Perhaps you think, and if living like this makes me lose, misunderstood, even persecute. Jesus doesn't sugarcoat the path. Blessed are those persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. When faithfulness hurts, heaven draws near. We do not seek conflict, but when it comes because we do what is right, we are not left alone. Christ walks with us. He knew opposition and the cross, and on that cross broke the power of injustice. That is why, even under pressure, there is a stillness, not of this world. The kingdom belongs to us, now and forever. So let us return to the beginning. You are the salt and the light. Heard through the fabric of the Beatitudes, these words take on weight. To be salt is to choose the humility that preserves what is good, the comfort that sustains, the meekness that pacifies, the justice that sets straight, the mercy that restores, the purity that clarifies, the peace that reconciles, and the faithfulness that perseveres. To be light is to let all that be seen, not to glorify us, but that others may glorify the Father. This is not ethereal spirituality. It is seen in how you work, how you respond to provocation, how you handle money, how you treat family, how you decide when no one watches. That is where it shows whether the lamp is burning. Jesus did not destroy the law or the prophets. He brought them to fullness. That is why his teaching is not a passing trend, it is a life embodied. He lifts us from legalism satisfied with appearances and invites us into love that fulfills the heart of every command. Sincerity replaces empty oaths. Reconciliation replaces offerings meant to cover unresolved conflict. Mastery over thoughts displaces fantasies that become chains. His kingdom is not theory, it is daily practice sustained by grace. Take a deep breath. What lies ahead on this path is not a staircase for perfectionists, but a road for the transformed. It does not begin by demanding. It begins by giving grace to see comfort, to heal, truth to order, strength to love. If these words feel like an impossible suit, look again through the lens of invitation. You are not asked to achieve this alone. You are invited to let the King work it in you. The fullness you long for is not far away. It begins when you say yes in today's small things, and that yes, repeated 1,000 times, becomes light others see and thank God for. Are you ready to keep climbing the mountain? What you've heard is not a beautiful prologue. It is the doorway. In the next stretch, Jesus dismantles the hidden mechanisms that entangle us inside. Anger that burns, looks that enslave, words that deceive, and shows us how the kingdom's truth is lived in thought, in feeling, and in the simplest gestures. Because the gospel does not only change what we do, it changes why we do it, and from where we do it. Here begins the renewal you've been searching for. He goes on to reveal that the problem is not just in visible acts, but in the impulses that spark them. You have heard it said, "Do not murder." But I tell you, anyone who is angry with his brother is guilty already. Do you see how radical this is? Jesus is not building a fence at the cliff's edge. He is raising a wall of protection at the trail's beginning. It is not enough to say, "I never killed." Uncontrolled anger, words of contempt, looks loaded with hate already carry the seed of destruction. He insists, if you remember, someone has something against you, leave your gift and reconcile. What is he saying? That true spirituality is not pretending devotion while ignoring unresolved conflicts. The altar cannot replace the embrace left undone, nor can prayer cover the wound we avoid healing. For Jesus, reconciliation is not optional. It is urgent. A heart at peace with others reflects a heart at peace with God. And he goes further. He warns it is not enough to avoid murder. We must learn to govern emotions and thoughts. Unjust anger becomes fertile ground for violence. Harsh words, that idiot, fool tossed lightly, carry weight that erodes dignity and distances us from the kingdom. In Jesus' logic, the tongue can be as dangerous as the sword. That is why he calls us to guard what we say, what we think, what we allow to grow in our hearts. Mismanaged anger divides, but reconciliation restores. Jesus knows it will not always be easy, but the instruction is clear. Make peace quickly, before the conflict rots into a chain hard to break. Settle soon. Don't let pride harden the heart. This is preventive medicine for the soul. Now, think of the magnitude of what he proposes to love even enemies. In a world living by eye for eye, tooth for tooth, he declares, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This is not an unreachable ideal but a spiritual revolution. Praying for those who hurt us shifts the battlefield. It is no longer about who wins, but about who lets God win inside them. Loving an enemy does not justify their evil. It refuses to let hatred rule us. It cuts the cycle of violence and opens the possibility that the other may also be transformed. This unconditional love is revealed at the cross, when Jesus asks forgiveness for those crucifying him. No one has shown such radical love, and he does not propose it as theory, but as the way. Here we see that the kingdom is not about reacting like everyone else, but about embodying compassion that disarms hostility. From anger we pass to another burning field, inner purity. You have heard it said, "Do not commit adultery." But I tell you, anyone who looks with lust has already committed adultery in the heart. With this, Jesus shatters the illusion that sin only counts when visible in action. The battle begins earlier, in the intimacy of thought. It is not enough to keep the body away from error. We must let God renew desires and thoughts. Purity is not merely avoiding the forbidden. It is total integrity. To be pure means to live without duplicity, without masks, with transparent intentions. And to reach this, Jesus asks for drastic measures. If something causes you to stumble, cut it off. Not literal mutilations, but radical decisions. If a situation, relationship, or habit triggers desires leading to bondage, step away. Purity costs, but it is worth more than losing the soul in the process. He also exposes the hypocrisy of his time, where inner impurity was hidden under outward religiosity. God is not impressed by facades. He looks at the heart. That is why the call is serious. Stop negotiating with temptation. Break with double life. Open your heart to the grace that purifies. Alongside purity comes honesty. In those days, it was common to swear by heaven, by earth, even by one's own head, to give weight to words. Jesus tears down the charade. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. In other words, live so your word carries weight by itself without embellishment. Integrity doesn't need flashy oaths. It stands on its own. Imagine a society where everyone spoke this way. Most traps, deceptions, and mistrusts poisoning relationships would disappear. The kingdom life is founded on coherence, that what we say reflects who we are, not adorning truth, but practicing it. Every time we keep a promise, every time we avoid exaggerating to impress, every time we keep our word even when it costs, we let the kingdom's light shine. Here we see a pattern. Jesus did not come to relax the law, but to fulfill it. It is not enough not to murder. You must reconcile. Not enough not to commit adultery. You must purify thoughts. Not enough to swear solemnly. You must be honest. Always. The kingdom aims deeper than behavior. It transforms the source, the heart. Step by step, he holds up a mirror revealing what we hide. Anger, desire, falsehood, not to condemn, but to invite to greater freedom. For what greater freedom than not being enslaved to resentment, lust, or lies? True freedom is not doing whatever I want, but being able to choose the good even when it costs. That is the freedom Jesus offers. The challenge is enormous, yes, but the comfort greater. We are not alone. Jesus shows the way and gives his Spirit so we can walk it. That this is not empty perfectionism, but progressive transformation that begins with a surrendered yes to God. Every reconciliation, every thought yielded, every honest word are bricks by which the kingdom takes shape in us and among us. And so the question arises, are you willing to look beyond the external and let God work in the hidden heart? For it is there, in the unseen, that the true spiritual revolution begins. We keep ascending, and on the mountain the air grows thinner. Jesus' teachings now penetrate the deepest fibers of daily life. After speaking of anger, purity, and honesty, he throws us into a challenge that unsettles anyone. Resist evil not with more evil, but with disarming good. You have heard it said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. In other words, don't pay back in the same coin. And to keep it from sounding abstract, he brings it down to examples. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other. If someone forces you to carry a load 1 mile, go 2. If someone takes your cloak, give your tunic as well. He is not promoting passivity in the face of injustice. He is showing a new way, breaking the cycle of violence with unexpected acts of grace. Can you imagine the disarmament of one who expects hatred and finds patience, who provokes conflict and encounters meekness, who seeks to humiliate and faces unshakable dignity. That disarmament cracks the hardness of the aggressor and plants seeds of transformation. Here we understand meekness is not weakness. It is spiritual power that can change stories. But the most radical comes next. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. There is no escape. Jesus is asking something against every human instinct: how to love one who hurts us, how to bless one who curses us. Yet in this command, the heart of God is revealed. The Father makes the sun rise on just and unjust, rain fall on good and evil. His love is not reciprocal, and if we want to resemble him, we must love beyond the logic of this world. To love enemies is not to approve their evil. It is refusing to let their evil infect us with hatred's poison. It is recognizing that behind hostility is a human created in God's image, who also needs grace. When we pray for them, we not only ask for their conversion, we let God heal our hearts of bitterness. This unconditional love is what sets apart the children of the kingdom. Limited love that loves only those who love back changes nothing. Radical love breaks chains and builds a different future. And this love we cannot manufacture. It is the fruit of receiving first the inexhaustible love of Christ. And here Jesus leads to the summit. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Not flawless perfection, but full maturity. Love that does not discriminate, a life consistent with the Father's nature. The goal is not to compare with others, but to reflect the divine character in fragile humanity. But this love does not remain in external relations. It extends into our spirituality. Jesus warns against practicing piety as spectacle. In his day, many prayed in plazas to be seen, gave alms with trumpets, fasted with gloomy faces to earn admiration. But he says, when you pray, go into your room. When you give, let your left hand not know what your right does. When you fast, anoint your head and wash your face. The teaching is clear. What we do for God doesn't need human applause. The Father who sees in secret rewards what is done sincerely. And in the midst of teaching on prayer, he gives us a treasure, the Lord's Prayer, not a formula for mindless repetition, but a spiritual map aligning us with God. It begins with worship. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, moves to surrender. Your kingdom come, your will be done, continues with daily dependence. Give us this day our daily bread, and enters forgiveness and protection. Forgive us, lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from evil. In those brief lines lies the heart of discipleship: worship, trust, dependence, forgiveness, and walking under divine protection. Pause and think. How would life change if we prayed this daily, not only with lips, but with heart? It would remind us we are not self-sufficient, that we need bread, grace, guidance. It would remind us forgiveness is not optional. As we want mercy, we must extend it. Jesus also reveals the power of inner treasure. Do not store treasures on earth, but store treasures in heaven. Once again, he overturns our logic. The world measures greatness by possessions, titles, accounts. Jesus measures greatness by generosity, faithfulness, service. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. If tied to earthly things, we live anxious and fearful of loss. If anchored in eternity, we live free to give, share, trust. To illustrate, he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body is full of light. If unhealthy, your body is full of darkness. The eye here is focus. What you look at, long for, pursue, there is defined whether your life will be light or shadow. Jesus invites us to focus our heart on what endures, what is eternal, and he seals it with a decisive truth. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and wealth. Discipleship is undivided loyalty. We cannot split between trusting God and trusting money, between seeking the kingdom and seeking human approval. One will win over the other. Jesus calls us to choose once and for all. And when that choice is made, freedom opens. We no longer live enslaved to anxiety about accumulating or appearances. Do you see the thread? Jesus is not merely correcting behaviors. He is transforming the source, the heart. He wants us to answer evil with good, to love without limits, to live spirituality in secret, to pray with authenticity, to treasure eternity, and to fix loyalty on one Lord. This is not impossible burden. It is the way of freedom. And here comes the invitation. What will you treasure? Whom will you serve? What focus will shape your life? For on that choice depends whether you walk in the darkness of the temporary or the light of the eternal kingdom. In this portion, Jesus touches one of life's most sensitive fibers, worry. After speaking of treasure and loyalty, he surprises with a call that seems almost impossible. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or wear. How not worry when food, clothing, future are real needs? Yet Jesus calls us to see life from another perspective. Look at the birds, he says. They do not sow or reap, yet the Father feeds them. See the lilies, they do not toil, yet not even Solomon was dressed like one. Are you not worth much more? With such simple images, Jesus breaks anxiety's spiral. He reminds us that behind creation's details is a providing Father who cares, sustains, supplies. Worry is the illusion that control depends only on us. It is loading our shoulders with what only God can bear. Jesus is not calling to irresponsibility, but to trust, to plan and work, yes, but without letting fear rule the heart. Worry adds no day to life. It steals peace from every day. The key is in a phrase: seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added. Order is vital. When the eternal takes first place, the temporal finds its place. It does not mean no lack or trial, but that the Father will always supply what is needed to fulfill his purpose. Anxiety fades as we trust tomorrow to the one who holds the universe. This call to trust links to another: do not judge. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. And he gives an unforgettable image. Before removing the speck from another's eye, remove the plank from your own. In other words, self-examination precedes criticism. Harsh judgment of others often mirrors our own unresolved struggles. It does not mean we cannot discern right from wrong. It means we have no right to condemn with arrogance. Those who judge without mercy forget they themselves live by mercy. Jesus seeks communities where instead of pointing fingers, we extend hands. For it is easier to destroy with words than to build with grace, and the kingdom needs builders, not executioners. Continuing, he speaks of persevering prayer. Ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. He reveals the Father's generous heart, not a distant God, but near, ready to respond. If we, flawed humans, give good gifts to children, how much more will the Heavenly Father give good things to those who ask? Prayer is not empty ritual. It is a bridge of trust between needy children and a good Father. From this flows the golden rule: do to others what you would have them do to you. Here Jesus condenses all the law and prophets in one mandate. If lived, the world would transform. Every relationship, every decision shaped by empathy. It is putting the neighbor at the center, measuring actions with the love we want to receive. Then he presents a choice with strong images: the wide gate and the narrow. The wide leads to destruction and many enter. The narrow leads to life and few find it. There is no neutrality. We all walk one path. The wide is easy, popular, attractive, but ends empty. The narrow demands surrender, discipline, faith, but leads to true life. Jesus does not deceive. Discipleship is not easy, but infinitely worth it. He warns also about false prophets. They come dressed as sheep, but are wolves. How recognize them? by fruit. Not speeches or appearances, but life's produce. A good tree bears good fruit. A bad tree bears bad. Jesus calls us to discernment, not seduced by sweet words without coherence. The climax of warnings: not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom, but only the one who does the Father's will. Here facades collapse. Not enough to say words, not enough to perform wonders, if the heart is not surrendered. What defines entry is not speech, but obedience. And to close powerfully, he gives the parable of two foundations. One builds on sand, the other on rock. Both raise houses, both face storms. Only the house on rock stands. The difference is not avoiding storms, but foundation. The rock is his words in practice. To hear without obeying is to build castles on sand. They look fine until rain comes. But to live his teaching is to build on rock. Wind may blow, rivers rise, storms strike, yet the house remains. Here lies the sermon's heart. It is not about admiring Jesus, but building life on him. Not enough to be moved by his words. We must turn them into daily decisions. Knowledge is not enough. Obedience is, and in that obedience lies the difference between fragile and unshakable future. When Jesus finished, the crowds were astonished. He taught, not like scribes, but with authority. That authority came not from titles, but from the coherence of life, from divine anointing, backing his words. They recognized, this is someone different, not repeating formulas, but bringing life. And so the Sermon on the Mount becomes an eternal compass, a guide untouched by time, because it touches humanity's core. It reminds us, the kingdom is not built with empty speeches or appearances, but with transformed hearts and lives grounded on the rock of Christ. Now the question reaches us, on what foundation are you building? Storms are not if they come, but when. The difference is not avoiding them, but standing firm. And only those who build on the rock stand. The echo of the sermon does not end on that hillside. It expands through centuries as a living invitation. But to grasp its force, we must pause on what it means to be disciples of this kingdom. It is not a list of new rules, but a radically different life. Jesus begins revealing what truly matters: the heart. He flips our standards. True happiness is not in accumulation, but humility. Not in escaping pain, but letting God's comfort transform. Not in imposing with violence, but living with meekness. Each beatitude is like a mirror showing the inverted logic of the kingdom. How can the poor, mourning, persecuted be blessed? Because in those conditions, hearts open, dependence becomes inevitable, and grace rushes in. This countercultural logic runs through the message. While the world says accumulate, Jesus says give. While culture says strike back, Jesus says pray for them. While society celebrates appearances, Jesus looks at the secret heart. This kingdom does not fit human success categories. It calls us to live from a new dimension, where the eternal defines the temporary. To be a disciple here is more than admiring Jesus as teacher. It is following him as Lord. And following means taking seriously his call to interior integrity. The anger we store, the lustful look, the careless word, all matter. God does not seek external perfection to display, but hearts willing to be transformed. Discipleship is not a mask, it is a process shaping the invisible and the visible, but living this way will not be easy. Jesus never hid it. He said clearly, we will be persecuted for righteousness. The world resists those who choose light, because light exposes darkness, yet in persecution is the promise. Theirs is the kingdom, not just future reward, but present assurance. Even in trial, God's presence sustains with peace. That peace shows itself in our mission to be salt and light. Salt preserves good in a decaying world. Light shows the way when darkness surrounds. Our faith cannot be hidden. It must shine, not for our glory, but so others glorify the Father. A consistent life is a testimony louder than words. Jesus also warns of empty religiosity. Giving, praying, fasting to be seen loses essence. God is not interested in spiritual theater, but in sincere acts born of love. The sermon confronts us. Do we live to impress people or please the Father? The answer defines authenticity of faith. The sermon also speaks of priorities. Seek first the kingdom. It is a call to order life. When the kingdom is first, everything else aligns. When sidelined, everything disorients. Relationships, emotions, decisions. Seeking the kingdom first is not adding God as accessory. It is acknowledging Him as foundation. He also gives practical principles for community. Not to judge harshly but examine ourselves, to live the golden rule, to beware false prophets, to remember that not all who say Lord will enter, only those who obey. And it all culminates in the final image. 2 men build houses, but only one remains because it is founded on rock. The rock is obedience to Jesus' words. The sand is appearance without root. The difference between standing and falling is not storm avoidance, but foundation. And storms will come. The question is, on what do we build? The sermon calls us to whole discipleship. Not pretty ideas for a moment, but a project of life. It challenges our deepest desires, words, attitudes, priorities. It reminds us true greatness is humility, true strength, meekness, true wealth, treasuring eternity. So hearing is not enough. Jesus said, whoever hears and puts into practice, there is the key. The Christian life is not measured by what we hear or know, but by what we obey and live. And in that obedience we find peace beyond understanding, freedom from fear, and hope in an unshakable kingdom. So what does this sermon mean to you today? Perhaps a reminder you need reconciliation. Perhaps a warning about thoughts you feed. Perhaps a call to trust more and worry less. Perhaps an invitation to stop seeking human approval and live for the Father. Whatever it is, this message remains alive, transforming, inviting to build on rock. We reach the mountaintop, and what we discover is not an old speech but a manifesto for life today. The Sermon on the Mount was not given to impress crowds, but to awaken disciples who live differently, who embody the kingdom in a broken world. When Jesus finished, the crowd was amazed. He did not speak like the teachers of his day, but with authority, not from books but from life. He taught what he lived what he taught. And that is why his words pierced hearts. But what matters is not just what they felt then, but what we do now. Hearing without practicing is like admiring a blueprint without ever building. Applauding the sermon without obeying is building on sand, fine until storms come. And storms come. Illness, loss, betrayal, uncertainty. Then it shows if life is grounded in Christ or appearances. To build on the rock is to decide daily, today I choose forgiveness over resentment, trust over anxiety, purity over indulgence, truth over lies, love even when not reciprocated. Each decision is a brick on solid rock. With time, that construction becomes a house no storm can topple. The sermon is not unreachable ideals. It is an invitation to a life transformed by grace. Jesus does not call us to achieve it all in our strength, but to open our hearts for the Spirit to work. He gives meekness when we want to explode, patience when urgency presses, compassion when we'd rather ignore, peace when all seems lost. The kingdom life is not built on self-sufficiency, but on humble dependence on the Father. And here lies the comfort. Every beatitude, every command, every warning is upheld by promises. The poor in spirit inherit, the mourning are comforted. The meek inherit, the hungry are filled, the merciful receive mercy. The pure see God, the peacemakers are called children. The persecuted possess the kingdom. Not empty words, but the guarantee of a faithful God. So the final question is inevitable. What will you do with this message? It is not enough to say beautiful. The sermon demands response. Will you let it remain inspiring words quickly forgotten, or foundation of your life? Will you keep building on sand, or start laying stones on the eternal rock? This sermon is a call to spiritual courage, not the easiest path, but the only one to true fullness. It invites us to leave superficiality and embrace purpose, to trust, reconcile, forgive, be salt and light, live not for human approval, but the Father's smile. And perhaps most astonishing is that it all begins with one step, not achieving all at once, but a surrendered yes. Yes to grace. Yes to forgiveness. Yes to the kingdom. One step of humility, trust, obedience, and each step opens a new horizon. So today, as these words still echo, hear Jesus' voice. Walk with me, build on me, let my light shine in you. Do not fear, I am with you. That is the sermon's close, and at the same time the beginning of your story. A story grounded on rock, strengthened by grace, illuminated by the kingdom's light. A life that in storms stands firm, and when the world sees that firmness, that unshaken peace, that enduring hope, they will know it is not by us, but by the one who spoke on the mountain and still speaks today to the heart. So the invitation is given. Climb the mountain each day, listen to his voice, put it into practice, for on that path you will discover what it really means to live. To live with purpose, to live with peace, to live with Christ.